shines through the trees, the ponderosa leaves. Well, it's all that I had hoped for. See the mountains shake in the wake of death, missing miners gold on the precipice of green. And it wouldn't really work for me, the ancient forestry. Well, it's all that I'd hoped for. And the spirit covers me, the cows keep vanishing to dust for all to see. There's a silent flame in the evergreen, coming through clear lake in the moment's mystery.
The sun has just set and the hours of witching have commenced. So I thought I would just go over very quickly what I'm currently reading at the moment and some other stuff. But this morning I was feeling quite demotivated and a little bit just down and not really feeling like I wanted to do very much of anything. So I always make a to-do list when I feel this way because it kind of just makes me feel the slightest more productive, especially if you put like make a to-do list at the top of your to-do list so you can just cross something off immediately and trick your brain into doing more things like that. So then I went for a walk, which was really nice by the stream. The book I'm currently reading, you guys, is actually I think the worst book I've ever read, maybe ever, in my whole entire life. I would love to do a whole video or start a whole series. I think I'm going to. I have it planned in my head and I've been thinking about it so much, but start a whole series about the worst books. Like, not semi-bad books, not books I give like 2 stars to, but books that like if I could, I would give like 0 stars to. The worst books I've ever read. Just do whole videos about that because it is so funny. This book is so bad, but it's making me laugh so much because it's so awful. And that book is Tantalize by Cynthia Lytic Smith. This is a young adult romance, supernatural romance. Where do I even begin with this one? The writing is of course awful, but there's just so much wrong with it. We are following Quincy, and she is about to inherit her family's Italian restaurant because both her parents have died and it's in the care of her uncle. However, they are trying to convert their restaurant into a Halloween-themed Dracula kind of place because they need to have something different to outshine their competitors. And part of this deal is that for some reason she, even though she's just a 17-year-old hostess, now has to find and train a chef who can basically be the star of the restaurant and take on the persona of like Dracula or some vampire chef to wow the customers. Quite an original idea. So basically we're following her as she is both at the same time in love with her best friend, who turns out to be a werewolf, and of course trying to train this vampire chef into being an actual vampire. I don't really know what else to say to you except for the fact that we literally just had a scene where someone turned into an armadillo. It's quite just out of nowhere. It came out of the sky. We didn't really know that there were other shifters in this world other than werewolves. I certainly didn't know that until the audiobook narrator, bless her heart, because she did not crack up for the whole thing, was like, he turned into an armadillo. So now there's were armadillos, we have were gators, were possums, we've got it all. This book has it all. Incredible. I don't really want to say too much more about it because I have nefarious things planned for this video about it. All right, so that is what I'm currently listening to, but let's talk about Phantom of the Opera, which is one of the best books I've ever read. So we've really got quite the range this week going on. I would love to talk quite extensively about the tabbing system I'm using and the annotating things I've got going on in Phantom of the Opera because I've got so many questions, and I just want to say first that I have planned out a whole annotations video separately from just this clip that I'm going to be talking about in this vlog, but I just thought this would be a really good way to start, basically as a little preface to that video, because that's probably my most requested video. I'm so sorry I haven't gotten out yet, but there's just so many things I want to say about tabbing and annotating a book and really looking at a book and just different ways and stuff like that. Anyway, so currently reading Phantom of the Opera. This is one of our dark academics books of the month. I will leave all the details for our book club down below, but suffice it to say I am loving this. I don't really know, I can't tell you what number reread this is for me because I read the book before Goodreads existed. So I think honestly it might be the 5th. It's either the 5th, the 6th, or the 7th. I'm inclined to think it's the 6th, so let's call it the 6th reread. But I hadn't actually previously annotated any of my copies of Phantom of the Opera. This is the first copy I ever had of it, so I just thought I would annotate this one. This one is the Penguin edition. This is the one with the really lovely cover designed by Richard Green, so I really love this. I haven't read too many different translations of Phantom of the Opera, and someone did ask me if I read it in French ever, and I have way back in elementary school because we read it in drama class, and then we actually put on the play The Phantom of the Opera for the school, so that was quite fun. I don't actually own a French edition. I really want to. Really funnily, in one of the book hauls that I'm about to film, I thought I had ordered a French edition of Phantom of the Opera off of thrift books, but then it turned out that the copy I got was actually in Korean. So yeah, I really wish I spoke Korean or could read Korean, but yeah, very funny. Anyway, so Phantom of the Opera, how am I annotating it? Like, what does all this really mean? I've gotten a lot of questions and I would love to talk about it. So basically every classic that I read, like with my own eyeballs, not via audiobook, I will tab for sure, but they all kind of range from various systems. Some I will create myself, others if it's for a specific university English class, I will kind of tab and annotate according to whether I have to write a specific essay about it or whether in the said class, if we're looking at specific themes and theories, that kind of thing. But a book like Phantom of the Opera, a French classic like this, where there are so many things going on in this book, let me just tell you, Phantom of the Opera has so much within it. It is so many things. For example, it is a French detective novel, it is a romance, it is a gothic horror novel, it is a comedy, it is one of the most hilarious books I've ever read, and if you read it you probably feel the same way, at least if you have that same kind of humor that's used in here. But it's one of the funniest books I've ever read, and it is like so many things wrapped into one. It is such a brilliant like crime novel. It's a novel about truth. There's a lot of political commentary going on in here. There's so much like horror and love and music. So much music. I love the intersection of gothic architecture and sound, which is what I'm going to talk about in a second. So let me just get back to my original point. So if I'm annotating a classic novel like Phantom of the Opera, and of course I'm not reading this for any class right now at university, but if I'm just doing it for myself, I like to devise kind of my own system, I guess, and my own kind of plan and my own corresponding colors with the tabs that I've got going on in here. Here they are for a little look right now. I'm 112 pages through, so that's what it's looking like. I am also I have the audiobook of this. I found a copy of it, a recording of it on YouTube, so that's been great. Not only would there be kind of specific ways that I would annotate a book if it was for a class, just in the realm of classics right now I'm talking about, if it was for a class or if I'm just doing it for myself, but there would also be kind of different levels, I guess, and different ways of annotating a book. For example, when I read 100 Years of Solitude, I was reading it for the first time and I was only annotating it based on things that I found fascinating and that I loved. I really didn't have a clear concept of, number one, what I was looking for, and number two, what kinds of things I was even looking for within that read, because it was only my first time reading it. With something like Phantom of the Opera, that is something I'm reading for the sixth time, let's say. I know exactly what I want to dig out. I know exactly what parts and pieces and fragments I want to find, and in this case kind of the level and not really intensity, I guess that's not the right word, but the scope at which I'm annotating this book is one that I would like, and I would in reality really like, to write a thesis or a very, very long paper on Phantom of the Opera. So that's kind of what all this craziness is. I don't normally go all out like this, number one, because when I read classics for the first time, there's quite a limited experience when you go in to annotate something, because you're not sure what's going to be there, and number two, because most classics that I'm reading, I'm not trying to write a thesis or a huge long paper on as the end goal. So those are kind of the reasons why I'm annotating this frantically, as if my life depends on it. I also have little sticky notes up here. So let's get into basically what the system is, because a lot of people have been asking very specifically about what it is, and I would love to talk about it. So I typically start off the title page or whatever. I'll put a few sticky notes in, and then with the specific tabs that I have, this is my little annotation kit, I guess. It's just my glasses case right now because my pink glasses are currently I have to get them adjusted and stuff, so I'm not wearing them in this video, but in here I just have highlighters and markers and pens this word, and I kind of picked the colors and picked these ones to correspond to the tabs that I have. So these are the tabs that I currently have right now. I don't love these ones, but it's okay. Like I said, I will put 2 stickies on the front to remind myself what they are if I ever need to look back, because when I first started this system, it took me a while to like get into it and get used to, and then correspond the colors and the different tabs and the colors of the pens to what I was looking for. So I should say too that these systems and these corresponding tab things to the theme or to whatever specific thing it is I'm looking for, of course will always change if I'm the one who's devising it, because for example, the first one I have here is politics and social commentary in brown, but in other novels there might not be, well, there usually is, but there might not be politics and social commentary, so then I wouldn't have it. And in this case, because it's not for a class, I've devised basically what I'm looking for as what I want to look for, which is so exciting because because it lets me hunt down and find things that I myself am so personally interested in, and themes and topics and theories and things that I want to research and things that I want to talk about that I find interesting in Phantom of the Opera. So that of course is one of the things, politics and social commentary. I'll just quickly run them down because why not? So the yellow tabs are for sound, music, singing, voice, because there's so much in Phantom of the Opera that is about the voice and the presence of the voice and kind of possession via voice and sound and singing, and the power and this kind of whole religious infusion that sound and singing and of course opera is composed with and composed of. And so that is one of the most fascinating things in here, I think, is that whole realm of singing and this whole genre. It's like a whole new genre. I also find it so interesting that not only is it of course Phantom of the Opera as in the actual physical structure of the opera house in Paris, but of course he's also the Phantom of the Opera in the terms of sound and music and the structureless thing. So it's kind of this dual haunting, if you will, which I find so fascinating. So that's what yellow is trying to search out and find quotes talking about that, scenes where that occurs in places where I think I could really pull out and make interesting arguments or conjectures or do my own other research surrounding things that are going on like that. So then we have red, which is for mass hysteria and paranoia concerning the ghost, because the Phantom of the Opera is also kind of this book that's quite similar to The Crucible and to other kind of mass hysterical situations in time and history, because everyone in this opera house and eventually within the community and even the society, they kind of get pulled into this legend and into this myth, and they start to attribute everything awful and everything going on to this very supernatural phenomena that they really have no proof of. And it's so interesting to see eventually everyone succumb to the legend and the myth of this ghost who's haunting the opera house. And there's just so much mass hysteria, so much spreading of fear surrounding this ghost when really we don't actually know whether he's even a real guy or not. So I find that fascinating as well, and it's such an interesting angle to look at this book from, which leads me perfectly into the next tab, purple. And every purple tab is looking at Phantom of the Opera as though it is a 100% ghost story, as though Eric the Phantom is an actual ghost of the supernatural sort. He's not human, he's not a real man, he is in fact a supernatural being. And there's quite a lot you can do with that. I haven't ever really looked at Phantom of the Opera through that lens, but something that kind of spurred me to do that is actually our other Dark Academics group book, We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I kind of was looking at it through that angle in that book, and it prompted me to do so in Phantom of the Opera. And when you slide Phantom of the Opera under the lens of a real ghost story, so many interesting avenues and so many things open up, and it is horrifying and it is amazing. So that's kind of what I'm looking at, as well as seeing if like this could actually be contrived as being an actual ghost story. This parallels quite nicely with the orange tab, which is looking at this book obviously as a detective novel, and of course it is a detective novel, but looking at instances where our narrator is, that's also a very fascinating thing about this book, is that the narrator is kind of, is it the author himself, Gaston? Is it someone else? Is it, we just don't know. But looking at areas of the novel where the detective aspects of the book really shine through. And there's also quite the storyline where if you look at Phantom of the Opera through the detective novel and through this lens of tangible reality and criminal undertakings and real detective work, you find that really maybe there isn't a phantom at all. Maybe Eric doesn't even exist, or if he does exist, he's just a dude. But if he doesn't exist, this book becomes a struggle between two brothers over fortune and family, and it's quite an interesting struggle and a really compelling read as well. And there's so much in there that could point you towards that angle as well. So it's such like a teetering, tottering kind of book that's really trying to trick you as well. Blue is Gothic and Gothic elements, architecture. What's really interesting about this specifically, and that I'm looking at when discussing through like these specific tabs, is that Phantom of the Opera is of course a Gothic novel, but it's set at a Gothic setting that is actually real. You can actually go to that place, and that place is of course the Paris Opera House or the Palais Garnier, and you can go there and you can see it and you can touch it. Whereas in a lot of Gothic novels, the setting is someplace totally made up and fake. But kind of the fact that Phantom of the Opera is set at this actual place is it's something else, and it does a lot. And the other thing that I'm looking at with the Gothic is this whole kind of world of the upper side of the opera house, and of course the basement and the bowels and the depths of the opera house. There's a whole lake under the opera house. There is actually a lake under the opera house, and of course Eric's domain is down there, the Phantom's domain, and you have all these mezzanine, and it is so interesting to look at it through like this split cordoning off 50-50 of above the opera house and below the opera house, and all of those elements that I mentioned earlier. So that is blue. Really quickly, pink is kind of the love and horror that's going on in here. We have a lot of romance, we have a lot of different relationships, we have a lot of like definitely manipulation, and we have a lot of really toxic and abusive relationships in Phantom of the Opera as well. Pink is all about beauty and horror and love, and then really simply green is just quotes I love, because this is actually a very beautifully written book at times, and it's full of quotes that I love. So that is loosely what all these tabs mean. Of course, sometimes they kind of interchange, and sometimes I will scribble things as well, which leads me to these guys at the top. These sticky notes are just notes that I've made, usually when kind of demarcating something with a sticky note isn't enough and there's more I want to say about that point. So for example, something like this, where I wanted to talk about how kind of the opera house is this whole other fantasy world, and of course we have the theater and the drama and stuff like that, but it's kind of just this facade where everyone essentially on stage is wearing a mask, and then everyone thinks Eric is the rude one because he wears an actual mask. But just kind of seeing how the facade and fantasy of the opera house itself is a world unto itself. It's very full of tricks and turns and things that aren't real as well. So that's kind of interesting to think about, specifically in relation to the mass hysteria findings, as well as the ghost story findings and stuff like that. So those are kind of what those are, just extra thoughts and extra things I want to research and think about as well. So I think I've rambled on for very long now about Phantom of the Opera, but that is him. I'm so happy reading this book. It's a very old friend, the oldest bookish friend. This was the first classic I read, and I just have so much love for it. I think I mentioned this last time. I was so scared stepping back in that I wasn't going to like it, but just I'm falling in love all over again, and it's a really nice feeling. So yes, I hope that answered some questions you guys are asking. If you have any more, please let me know. Like I said, I am planning to film a whole video about annotating, but I just thought I would sit down and I guess not so quickly break down what I'm doing, what I'm annotating in Phantom of the Opera. So yeah. And speaking on that, I do actually plan on writing, if not my last year thesis of undergraduate, but some huge thing on Phantom of the Opera academically, because I think it's a really amazing classic. I think there's so much to it, and so much more to it than like it leads you to believe. And yeah, so in love with this, but that is that. As for just talking about it generally, we could be here all evening, but I'm just now at the part where the curse has been placed on the opera house. I don't really want to spoil anything, and we've had some architectural catastrophes, to say the least. So that is where I'm at. I also wanted to give some examples of like what I actually like highlight and underline. I will like put a tab on the page, and then a lot of the times I will like underline with whatever I have, I guess, to kind of match the color. For example, this one is a good page because we've got orange for the detective, purple for the ghost, blue for the gothic, and then we have a little bit of brown for politics. So right off the bat, one of my favorite things is the first line of the whole novel, which is "The Phantom of the Opera did exist." So right away, as well as in the detective novel area, we've got kind of this whole thing of truth, like what's actually going on here, who is actually doing this haunting, why are all these awful things happening at this opera house. And so this one's kind of a split between a ghost story, you could look at it through that lens, or of course the detective novel. Something that I've highlighted in green, which is also about the ghost, is one of the first descriptions we get about him from Joseph Bouquet, who has a lot to say about the Phantom, but he says that his eyes are so deep set that you cannot make out his pupils. All you can see are two big black holes, as in a skull. His nose is almost non-existent when seen sideways, and this absence is a horrible thing to behold, which I love that quote as well. A quote that I really loved in green is when Raoul is kind of just seeing Christine again, and it says, "You cannot muzzle a heart as you would a hound, and even a hound muzzled with two hands to prevent it from barking unbearably can still be heard growling." Something I tagged with yellow about singing and voice and stuff is a review of Christine's voice and her singing, saying, "Listening to her Ophelia, one wondered if Shakespeare had left his resting place in the Elysian field to help her rehearse Hamlet, and when she assumed the star-studded crown of the Queen of the Night and the magic flute, Mozart must have left the heavens to come and listen to her." So nice. Anyway, I'm gonna read a bit more of this before bed tonight. This is basically my plans for the rest of the night. Alright, hey, so it is almost my bedtime actually, but I guess this whole vlog is just pretty much gonna take place during the evening hours. But I just thought I would come back and talk again about Phantom of the Opera because it's also kind of turning into just a Phantom vlog. I am now at the chapter just starting off the very famous masked ball scene, the masquerade at the opera house, and Christine has just invited Raoul to accompany her there, to meet her there, because it is a masked ball and no one, I mean, you can always tell who people are at masked balls. I hate that trope, but at least in the book everyone is pretty much wearing a full face mask and no one can really tell who they are because she's just told him that like her life depends on it, that he's not recognized and she's not recognized and they're not seen together. There's been so much that has just gone on. I love the background that we're given. I think it's so interesting, the story with obviously Christine's father, the very famous Swedish violinist, and basically how his love for stories transferred onto her has really catastrophic consequences in that it makes her very gullible and very willing to believe in the said angel of music who is supposed to descend and visit people who are gifted in the ways of music and basically train them to become musical prodigies, which is what she believes is happening to her. Because if I haven't mentioned, Christine is one of our protagonists in Phantom, and she is a singer at the opera house. She's pretty much always been like an understudy and not very talented or valued, but all this starts to change when she starts getting lessons and starts to be taught. I'm just loving it so much. I'm now 124 pages through and it's so good. Some of the green tabs, which are the tabs I put in for lines that I just think myself are really beautiful. One of my favorite ones comes from when the two new directors who take over the places of the old directors, Richard and Moncharmin, they're going into the opera house to try and ascertain for themselves if there is a ghost and if he really does occupy box 5, which is the Phantom's box, the box that's supposed to be given up to the Phantom at every single performance. So they walk in, and the way that the opera and the seats and the setting, the way that it's figured as like a sea and an ocean is so beautiful. So I'll just read you this really one small passage because I loved it. They found themselves virtually alone in the vast and gloomy theater. All was silent around them. This was the tranquil hour when the machinist went for a drink, deserting the stage for a while, halfway through raising a set. A few rays of light, a wan, sinister light that seemed to issue from a dying sun, fell from somewhere upon an old tower whose pasteboard crenellations rose above the stage. In this fake darkness, or deceptive light, rather, everything took on a fantastic appearance. The dust covers thrown over the surrounding seats suggested an angry sea, whose dull gray-green waves had been suddenly stilled by secret order of the Phantom of the Sea. Montchalmin and Richard were as if shipwrecked amidst the motionless turbulence of a cloth sea. Like sailors who have abandoned ship, desperately trying to swim ashore, they made for the boxes on the left. There, in shadow, stood the 8 great polished columns supporting, like so many stone pillars, the threatening bulk of the pot-bellied jagged cliff rising from the sagging strata of the boxes that bulged out of the grand first and second tiers. Wow. Yeah, I just love the way architecture is played around with a lot in this book. In terms of the Phantom, we actually have not seen him yet all this book, although we've run into, of course, so many people who have by now seen him or said to have seen some shadowy figure, or a description that I read earlier about like his face and the skeletal head and stuff like that, but we haven't actually yet met him. This read through is also reminding me how much I dislike Raoul, and and he's quite dramatic, very, very dramatic, a little bit wimpy, and just very ineffectual, and I don't know, he just shoves his presence in and like thinks it's warranted and wanted and doesn't really care when people tell him no and stuff like that. I am really excited though, because I believe in this chapter we're going to be meeting the Phantom in the flesh for the first time, because he hasn't really had very many, like, he has had lines and stuff, but it's just been a disembodied voice. I'm really, really loving this so much. I'm gonna go read some more, a little bit more before bed. I'm loving him. Hey there, Delilah. It is Friday, and I don't know how long this vlog is. I imagine it's quite long. I might split it up, I might not, but regardless, I thought I would come back and chat probably the last thing about Phantom of the Opera again, because wow, I will be in the middle of reading Phantom, and I'll be going through a page. I've got my pens out, my highlighters out, my sticky notes out, and I'll just be going through, and then I will like audibly like gasp and like sharply intake a breath, and my roommate will be like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not good." Like, this book, it's so good. I forgot how good it is. It's just so good. I'm like, oh my gosh, there is so many reasons why this is my favorite book. It's just crazy. It's actually crazy. Like, every single page there's something I want to like dig out and preserve and keep and study, and it's insane. I'm currently 154 pages through. I'm just at the part now where Raoul and Christine are kind of having their little romance before he goes away on his voyage to the north. And okay, let me just say one thing. I despise Raoul. I think he's, first of all, he is the biggest drama queen I've ever seen. Carolyn and I have been like laughing our heads off about it, because Raoul is the most dramatic person I've ever seen. Like, something bad will happen and he'll just collapse. He'll fling himself onto couches, he'll like curse Christine's name, and then the next page he's like, "Oh, but I love her," and it's just really funny watching him live his life in this book, because he's not having a good time, like basically the whole thing. One part that I thought was really funny is when Raoul's hiding in her closet in her dressing room at the opera, and then of course Christine starts to hear the angel of music, the voice, through the wall, and Raoul's just kind of in the closet like being Simp City, and then he describes Christine's reaction to hearing the voice, and you feel so, I don't feel bad for him, but like you could feel so bad for him because he loves her so much, but like her reaction to hearing just a voice is, "A contented smile appeared upon her bloodless lips, the smile of a patient at the first glimpse of hope that her illness might not be fatal." It's over for Raoul. It's over for him. Just like seeing and watching and reading Raoul's reaction to Christine's reaction to the voice feels bad. One of my other favorite scenes is when Christine and Raoul are like going through the opera together, and Christine's showing him everything and introducing him to everything, and there's so much talk of architecture and the people who occupy the opera house, and it talks about how she knows everyone. I just thought this was a really nice passage as well. She showed him the whole of her fake but vast empire. It spread from the ground floor to the rooftops, over 17 stories peopled by innumerable subjects. She moved among them like a much-loved queen, encouraging them in their labors, sitting down in the storerooms, or giving words of advice to the costumers whose hands hesitated to cut into the rich fabrics destined to clothe heroes. She knew of old couples who lived tucked away in forgotten corners. Forgotten by successive administrations and untouched by palace uprisings, these people had lived in the opera house for countless years and had no recollection of the world outside. The history of France had moved on, unbeknown to them, and nobody out there now remembered them. It's just so good. Ooh, just like the French history and like this book. I also think it's super cool. I think the last thing I want to say right now is that Gaston Leroux took so much inspiration, and one of his favorite authors, French authors specifically, was Victor Hugo, which is so cool, and so much like specific inspiration is in here, because if you know what I'm thinking of, it's The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Like, yeah. The next chapter that I'm gonna be at is Apollo's Lyre, and that's like such a good chapter, and then lots more things will kind of unravel after that chapter, because yeah, having a really good time with this. But yeah, it's Friday, which means I'm probably gonna close off the vlog here. If you are reading Phantom, or for that matter, We Have Always Lived in the Castle, either by yourself or if you're joining in for the Dark Academics Halloweenathon, if you're reading it now, if you're reading it during our readathon, please let me know. Nothing gives me more joy than seeing people read my favorite book, and I know I've been screaming at everyone, literally taking me like page by page updates, because I think it is so interesting and I love seeing people's reaction to it. Anyway, I'm gonna go probably make some lunch or something, and I guess I will see you very soon in my next video, unless I cut this vlog in half, and then we shall see. So yeah, regardless, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're keeping safe and happy and healthy and reading well, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for all of your lovely words and support, and yeah, okay, ciao.